everybody. Nice to see everybody out this morning. Must have a lot out traveling today. I know Tim and Betty are gone. Before we get into our lesson this morning, let's go ahead and go to prayer this morning. Anybody, anywhere? Okay. Ruby?
Remember my family and remember my niece Barbara's son Michael Street.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Continue to remember me and my family, remember my two brothers and my mother, and continue to remember Debbie, that her side effects to her medication. Pray spiritual coach in that.
All right.
Always remember Tommy, remember Amanda while she's away. She is kind of in the middle of her time there, and she's getting a little homesick, so just pray that she'll be okay.
Thank God this morning, Trish had some surgery on her left arm week before last and had stitches out Friday morning, and everything's gone well with that. She's already had relief. This pinched nerve in her arm affecting her back. She's already had relief from that. I'm thankful. I know she is. All right, anyone else with a spoken request? I'm sure everyone has unspoken prayer requests. Let's stand if you would, please. Let's try to remember each other's prayer requests. Should be pretty easy this morning. There's only a few of us in here. Ronnie, you mind leading?
Dear most precious Heavenly Father, thank you for the privilege and
opportunity to come into your house this morning. Pray that everything we do here, Lord, is done to bring you glory. Forgiveness of our sins.
Lord, we pray God,
Amen. All right, before we start, I'll also ask if anyone's read a verse or a passage of scripture over the last week or so you'd like to share with the rest of us.
Mark, I had a verse that had been kind of sticking in my head since a Sunday school lesson a few weeks ago, about those Edomites and things like that. Let me find it real quick. It's in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27, it says, "Withhold not good," this is talking about treatment of neighbors, it says, "Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in thy power of thine hand to do it." Since that Sunday school lesson, I'd come across that verse just after that, and it's been stuck in my head. And maybe a reminder from the Lord that, if it's within our power to do good, we need to probably do that.
Amen. It's a good lesson for all of us.
The Lord bless us with that.
All right. Anybody else? All right, we'll get into the lesson this morning, and the title of it is "Till Kingdom Come." If you got your booklet, it starts on page 36. Is where we're at this morning. We're in the book of Micah this morning. This is some of these minor prophets that we're studying out of. These are probably the most what we read out of these is when we have a focused study on these like this. It's hard to, sometimes it's easy for us to kind of skip over those. And when you read the Bible or study the Bible, we don't like to think too much about the minor prophets. Have you ever thought about the word hope? It's one of those words that can be both a verb or a noun. Right? Most of the time, we and people in general use it as a verb, right? I hope it quits raining soon. Right? Said that all day yesterday. I hope I get that new position at work. I hope I have something good for dinner today, which I will be. I hope Tim and Betty have a good vacation this week, right? So we use it as a verb. It's something that In these examples, it's hope is a desire or even a wish. We use that word hope to kind of represent, I wish this would happen, right? I hope this would happen. I hope that this comes to pass. So we want something to happen or not, so we hope for it to be so, right? But hope for the Christian goes a little bit beyond that, doesn't it? It goes, the word hope goes farther than just being a wish or a desire. We use the noun tense of the word as if hope is a tangible thing, right? To us, it is pretty much a tangible thing. We may not be able to lay our hands on it. So let's think about some other examples for the word hope. I hope that God will meet my needs. I hope that the Lord will save me from sin. I hope that I will spend my eternity in heaven. Don't we all, as Christians, have those hopes, right? Those are things that we specifically hope for. So the examples that I just gave, are those simply desires or wishes? The way I use those? I'll say no, they're not simply desires. What would be the difference? Why would those things not be just simply a wish or a desire that we gave for the earlier examples? Anybody?
Necessities.
Okay. Anybody else? You know, when we hope as a Christian, we have some expectations that go along with that, don't we? We're not just like, I hope that it quits raining today, and eventually it's going to quit raining. It always does, right? But we have some expectation that all of these things are going to happen, right? I hope that God will meet my needs. I hope that the Lord will save me from sin. I hope that I will spend my eternity. How many of you in this room are counting on those things happening? You're not just wishing for those to happen. You expect they're going to happen, right? You have confidence that they're going to happen.
If we're Christians, we know.
Right.
But you used it as a verb.
It's all right. So, but we have confidence that those things. All right. So let me change it up. My hope is that the Lord will save me from sin. Right.
Now you changed the whole thing.
So, but we have confidence that those things are really going to happen. It's not a wish list for me. It's not these are my desires, and I really hope that happens. Because as Christians, our hope is that God is going to do all of those things. It is literally, our hope is almost something that you can put your hands on, that you expect is going to come. So that's what really changes the word from being a wish or a desire to a feeling of expectation, right? So in this quarter, we have been studying sections of the Minor Prophets, and for the most part, all of their messages have been similar. All the ones that we've been studying since this quarter started, Amos and all the Hosea and all of them before this. Repent or face judgment, right? I mean, that has been the message of the Old Testament prophets from the time that God was sort of fed up with what Israel was doing. So he started really having, all of these prophets were really concentrating on, look, stop what you're doing or face certain judgment. Gave him one warning, right? No, we know that's not true. Gave him over and over and over and over again until God finally hit the point where judgment's coming, right? We've been talking about this, and we're not going to talk about all the details of that. So they had fallen into some pretty specific sins, right? And I know that John has talked about it over the past, several lessons that I've taught here. Their number one sin that I'll just call them the Israelites, God's people, had committed against him was idolatry, right? They got into all kinds of idol worship and all this stuff, and so that was the number one sin. God doesn't like that, by the way. He's to be number one, and if you put something else before him, that's idolatry. And they had got involved in that. But if you go back and if you look at it, and this is a short book, if you get time to go back and read it at your leisure, you'll find that they were also guilty of a host of social sins. What would be a social sin?
Sin against their fellow human.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they were doing. And it wasn't just a single thing that they had focused on. So they are not only sinning against God, they are sinning against one another. The entire nation had become so corrupt. They were stealing from one another. There was a great deal of land grabbing. Somebody couldn't pay a debt. Somebody couldn't do this, couldn't do that. Well, that's fine. We'll just take your land. And literally tossed them out of their houses, out of their homes. Those that could not pay off their debt or take care of whatever the issue was. They were guilty of adultery. They were guilty of coveting. And this was not just neighbor to neighbor or whatever. This is even the leaders, the people that they're supposed to be guiding them, leading them, are taking advantage. You know, they had and they were taking bribes so that those that had some money could further take advantage of those without. So it kind of put me in mind of the verse that John just read right there, and it's a perfect example. God doesn't like that. God doesn't want us to sin against him, but neither does he want us to take advantage of one another or sin against one another. So there, if you go back and you read the 4 chapters that lead up to our passage today, Micah kind of lays all these things out and all of the sins that they had done against one another. And it's just kind of a laundry list of things that God wasn't happy with. And that was leading up to their judgment. And since they chose to ignore these warnings, the prophesying became more and more about the judgment at hand. It stopped being, you better stop or this is going to happen, to you better get ready because this is going to happen. That's what it basically turned into. All of these minor prophets, that's what their focus was on. So their judgment was at hand. Now, I'm not going to go over all the details of the judgment. We talk about it over and over again during Sunday school classes, so you guys probably know it better than I do. But they have some pretty bleak and dismal times looking ahead, don't they? I mean, when the invasions start, this is not going to be a picnic for Israel. God is pulling back. He's letting happen whatever's going to happen to the people. He's told them what would happen. He even told them what the enemy armies are going to do, which ones are coming in, which direction they're coming. None of this is a surprise. Of course, they acted like it was. It's almost like today's society. You know, don't we have the same kind of warnings today? This is a sin. This is not right. You can't keep doing this. This has got to stop. It all lines up with God's word. Same warnings over and over. You have people that preach about it all over the place. Does it get through to people? Not very often, right? It's the ones that listen seem to be far fewer than the ones that just go on about their business, just like Israel did. There was a remnant that held on to the things of God. There were people that still remained faithful to God, and we talked about them a little bit, but for the most part, the nation as a whole has become corrupt and sinful. All of it. God's done with it. He is going to pass judgment. Now, when you're on the wrong side of judgment from God, that's not a good place to be. So we all know what happened with Israel, Judah, God's people. They were invaded. A large number of them were taken into captivity. A large number of them were just exiled from their homes, from the land, the cities, the towns that they lived in. They're just out. Everyone's out. You're homeless, you're wandering, the land laid without, there's no crops being grown, there's no production, there's no anything. This is a very bleak and desolate time. Think about us, think about our country for just a minute. You know, we live in the greatest nation on earth. And we have a land where, you know, we're free to go about our business. We do whatever we can do to make a living, and we can buy, we can trade, we can have all of these things. And you know, you look at some of newsreels, news clips, reels, that sounded old, didn't it? I don't know where that came from. But you watch some of this stuff and you look at other countries, and does it look like other countries have it as good as America does? No, it doesn't. You look and you say, how these people look like they just barely have clothes to wear, food to eat, and their living conditions are much different from what we have here, what we expect here, right? We're pretty pampered here in America. Now, we work for it, most of us, but we're sort of pampered. We have it pretty nice. We have it pretty easy. Can you imagine if all of that tomorrow was taken away from you? You're told you can't live in this house anymore. We're keeping all your stuff too. You're out. And you're going to live. You got to feed your family. You got to take care of your wife. You got to take care of whoever. You're out. You're out of your house. Do you think times would be pretty bad?
Yes.
You think you'd be able to survive it for 70 years? Well, probably. I'm pretty sure I don't have another 70 years. But that's pretty bleak and terrible times, is it not? What have you got to look forward to every day? Now, I'm trying to paint a picture of how bleak and how terrible it must have been for God's own chosen people when God pulls back his hand of protection from them because they've turned their back on him. And okay, you're on your own. You're out. What a terrible place that must be. I can't even imagine how you would get up every day and find something to look forward to. What's going to be good about today? What are we going to get into today? Oh, we're going to try to find enough food to keep us alive today. We're going to try to find enough water. We're going to try to find something to put on our bodies. That's pretty terrible, but that's what Israel faced. You know, sometimes we look back at this and we read this strictly as a history lesson, and we sort of leave out the humanity part of it. But just think if that was you and you're responsible for some children. They're in your care, and you have to provide for them while you've just been kicked out. And everybody's out. You can't do anything. Somebody else owns your house now, somebody else is running the land now, and you can't have anything. Maybe you get hauled away to another city. Maybe your kids get sent over here, you get sent there. You're separated. I can't think of a worse place to be. I mean, that's pretty terrible to have, people that you love and you care for, and you can do nothing. You're just trying to keep yourself alive. Much less try to provide for the people that you're responsible for. Terrible, terrible place. So what do they probably have a hard time coming up with? What's the word we're talking about? Hope. Boy, they would have a hard time having any hope whatsoever, wouldn't they? And then you think about the poorest people, the people who have already been abused by their fellow kinsmen, countrymen, and they're out there too. Boy, they must have absolutely zero hope. Number one, they were getting beat up by their own people. Now they're getting beat up by, marauding armies coming in and took over the land. But I'm sure that in their minds, they hoped that this would all be over soon, right? They had that kind of hope. They hoped to be back home. They hoped to get their lives back. Wouldn't that what they'd be wanting that, right? That it would be more like that wish list thing again. I really wish that we could get back to where we were. I really wish I had this again. I really wish I had that. But do you think that they had any expectation that it would? Do you think that they had any confidence that things were going to get back to normal? Do you think that they had any faith that things were going to be back to normal? Probably not at that time. They didn't have that. So, of course, again, God uses his prophets for a specific purpose. Most of the time when we read about these prophets, especially the minor prophets, so you have this message, this prophecy about, these terrible things that are coming. Most of the time, there's also, way back at the end of this, some promise of hope to come. And in this chapter that we're getting ready to read this morning, at least a portion of it, that's what they're given. So we're going to talk a little bit about the hope that Micah delivers to them after telling them, this is what's going to happen because of this, and this, you're going to be out. But there's some hope, and we'll talk about this hope. So let's read through this, and then we'll talk about it. If you guys have anything to add to this, please don't be bashful today. There's not so many of us in here today. This is taken from Micah chapter 5, and it's going to be, I think, the 13 verses. No skips in or anything. So it's in the first verse, it's, now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek.
But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting.
Therefore will he give them up, until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel.
And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall lie, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian...
That's all right. All right, you can go with it if you want to. All right. And this man shall be the peace when the Assyrians shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces. Then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men.
And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders.
And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people as a dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men.
And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver.
Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off.
It shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots.
And I will cut off the cities of thy land, and throw down all thy strongholds.
And I will drive witchcraft out of thy hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers.
Thy graven images also will I cut off, and thy standing images out of the midst of thee. And thou shalt no more worship the work of thine hands. Amen. All right, so a lot of stuff in here. And again, you know, the chapters leading up to this, they describe the sins of Israel against God and against one another. And then of the impending defeat by the Assyrians. They're going to be conquered by the Assyrians. But that's not all that God has in store for them. There's also this message of hope that we see in these verses of what is also to come. I would describe this as, this is what kind of separates this from being a wish list to a true message of hope that they can only have because of God. If God didn't say it, I would say that if this would be more like a wish list item. This would be great if this happened, but I really don't have any confidence that it does. Now, remember, this is God's people. They've seen and heard and studied all their lives. Now, this is long, long after their delivery from bondage in Egypt. But these people are raised, and everything they do all day long, they study, they know the scriptures, they know the history, they know the things that God did for their forefathers. Miracles that they have heard, passed on, and is written down. You know, everything about their society was based on the things of God, right? It wasn't like they had some other, well, here's the Constitution for the nation of Israel, and over here's your religion that you want to get involved in. It's all the same. Everything that they did was ruled by the law of God, right? That's what they followed. So they are very familiar with everything that God did. You should have a little confidence in it just simply based on that. If God sends a person, a messenger, a prophet to give you that message, I'm speaking, these are the words that God gave me. I guess the hardest part for them would be believing, but who are you to be delivering this message? You know, he'd have to have a little credibility, and, you know, who are we going to listen to? Because it looks terrible. But God gives them this message of hope. So in the first verse, he talks about, gathering yourself in troops. You're going to get conquered. I mean, that's what this is. You better assemble. You better be ready. You're getting ready to get attacked. They are getting invaded. He tells them to gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with the rod upon the cheek. They're going to get conquered. There's no other way about it. But that message also comes with hope. In verse 2 he says, But thou, Bethlehem, Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting. So he tells them that there is a new ruler yet to come. Now he doesn't say when. They don't know when it's going to happen, but he is giving them this message of hope. There's a ruler coming, a new ruler coming, and he's going to be like no one else before. And you get a glimpse of, for us, it's easy to see. I hope it's easy for us to see exactly who they're talking about here, who Micah is prophesying here. Because it says he is yet to come, but he's also always been. Well, that's got to sound a little strange to these people. Who could that possibly be? Now, remember, from time immemorial, they've been expecting a Messiah. They've wanted a Messiah. They've needed a Messiah. And God has sent deliverers over their history, right? Moses, he delivered them. He led them out. But they haven't had the Messiah yet. Now, each one of these, I'm sure that as they've had different deliverers throughout their history, they thought, oh, this is the one. This is the one. But that hasn't come to pass yet. They're still waiting. And Micah is starting to give them an idea about this Messiah, this new king, this new leader that's going to come for them. He even tells them where this leader will come from, which is a pretty specific fact, don't you think? It's not like he just said, look, there's going to be a new leader come, he's going to come up and this and that. He specifically tells them that he's going to come out of this little town, small among all the thousands of the cities and whatever in the kingdom of Judah. That's where he's going to come from. Why do you think that detail was so important?
Indicate who?
Say again?
To indicate who?
Okay.
Prophecy.
When there's little details, it's pretty easy to say, you know what? It's going to rain today. Now, it may or may not. It may drizzle. It may be a downpour or whatever. Or I look outside and say, yeah, I think it's going to rain soon. And you say, well, Mark could be right, he could be wrong, or whatever. But if I was to tell you, look, there's going to be a thunderstorm at 1:07 this afternoon. Wow, at 1:07, you're probably going to be watching your watches. Let's see if Mark was right on this. Let's see how close we are now. No, I'm not saying it's going to rain at 1:07 today, okay? I'm just making that up. But when you start adding these little details, and then things start transpiring that line up with those details, doesn't that lend a little bit of credibility to wow, he said this was going to happen, that's where it's going to come from? Your confidence goes up, your faith goes up, right? When you start seeing the things of God being fulfilled, just exactly as he said it was, doesn't that increase your faith? Doesn't that make you, then you can start expecting. You know what? If God said the Messiah or this new king or this leader was going to come out of Bethlehem, I'm going to be looking for Bethlehem. That's what I'm going to be looking at. Now, if I tell you it's going to rain at 1:07, you're probably not going to expect it's going to rain at 1:07. But if God gives you that information, you're probably going to be paying attention to what was said here. So, when those promises, when those prophecies start to be fulfilled, it causes an increase in confidence and an increase in faith, right? So now your hope starts taking a different form. Hope is no longer just a wish list. You have something that you're expecting is going to happen. You have a hope instead of just simply hoping for something. I hope everybody understands the point I'm trying to make here. All right, anybody before I go on? All right, next couple verses. and you have to keep in mind as you read this, and it was a little difficult for me when I was studying this, because this kind of jumps back and forth between he's talking about what's going on now and then into the prophecy, and it just kind of goes back and forth, and you have to really study it, make sure you're reading what he's intending here. He says, therefore will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth, then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide. For now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And again, this is another one of those passages where the two verses, one's talking about right now, what's getting ready to happen, and then the rest of the prophecy, the hope part of it down the road. So it's talked in these two verses that for right now, God is going to allow his children to be taken. Just that simple. They're going to come in, he's going to let them be taken. But only for a time. And he lets them know that there's a time. Now we learn later through one of the other prophets, 70 years, right? And we know that 70 years later, sure enough, we see fulfillment of that promise. After 70 years, the remnant comes home and they start rebuilding. So that's what he's talking about. So his children will be taken, but it's only going to be for a very specific amount of time. There is a time of suffering that they will have to endure. That's those bleak times that we already talked about, and all those terrible things that are going to happen. They are going to suffer. And he talks about it. He compares it here. He says that she which travaileth hath brought forth. He's comparing it to labor, basically, childbirth. That's what he's talking about. But it's going to be pain. There's going to be pain and suffering for a period of time. They cannot avoid that. They're past that point. And then when he allows it, and again, God's in control of this. God is the one that is allowing these things to happen all throughout here. A remnant will return to Israel and will join with the others there. And this is very specific. These are the details that he gives in this prophecy. I would imagine that those that heard this, that are around at the time, if there's any that are around that 70 years later to see all this, that's what he was talking about. Man, God knew what he was doing. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. Can you imagine how those people's faith really increased? Well, say you were a young person and then 70 years later you saw all this starting being fulfilled. You'd be pretty happy about that. Then he starts talking about, kind of changes gears, and he starts talking about this leader, this coming ruler. And it says that he will stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the name of the Lord, right? So this person, the son of God, that's who's coming. That's who's their new ruler, their new leader that's coming is of God. He's come in the strength of God and in the name of the Lord. And he will be great till the end of his reign, right? Thank you, John. It specifically says, to the ends of the earth. That's forever, right? He will be great forever. There will not be a time that he will not be great, that he will not be ruling, that he will not be reigning. That's this Messiah that's coming to their new leader for them. All right, in verses 5 and 6, he says, and this man shall be the peace when the Assyrians shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod, and the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. Now this part was a little confusing, and I don't know how many of you have a clear picture of that just from what I read there or reading that. But again, it seems to jump back and forth in chronology again. And so I'm thinking, well, who is this guy and who are these 7 shepherds and 8 principal men? Anybody know who they are? I don't think anybody else does either. So apparently what the commentators sort of agree to, if you go back and you read some of the commentaries about this passage, is there is some agreement that the Assyrians at some point will attempt another attack on God's people. But there's going to be a difference this time. This time, they have God's man standing there with his people, and it does not happen. It all gets shut down. They are defeated. They are not permitted to come back in and attack Israel again and defeat God's people again. Now, I don't know, because Micah doesn't give us any more information than that, and I don't see mention of that anywhere else. I couldn't find a reference to it, and like I said, the commentaries, if you go back and read those, they sort of say, this is all we know. Apparently, it is the leader and his group of leaders under him that defeat this attack from the Assyrians. And that's kind of all we have. But the point, I think, is that, you know what? The Assyrians may try this again, but I am not allowing this ever again. This is not going to happen again. Your new king, the new Messiah, this will not happen again. The Assyrians will not be successful in another defeat of God's people. That's God's promise. We know from all of these years later that God doesn't make a promise that doesn't come true. Our hope, I hope, is much more tangible than what these people had, right? Because theirs at this point was probably, man, I really hope that comes true. Our hope is we see all this stuff happening, and to us it's like, I have total confidence that if God says that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. Anyway, all right, anybody have anything before I keep going? I'm trying to squeeze all this in. All right, I'm going to read verses 7, 8, and 9 together, I think. And it says, "And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people, as a dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass, that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through, hath trodden down, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver." Let's just do 7 and 8 there. I don't know how I got kind of mixed up. So anyway, he points out now, and of course we know this to be true already, because we go back and we know what happens after the Messiah comes, right? They don't have all that. God's people will be living among the Gentiles. Did that come to pass? I mean, look at us, right? We're God's people now. We are the Gentiles. We're God's people. They will flourish. They will continue to grow. They will grow strong. Can we agree that that all happened as well? All of this that's been prophesied has come to be. God will not only bless them, but he also will bless, if you read that in verse 7, even those around them. So God is going to bless his people when he talks about, as the dew and showers from upon the grass, and tarries not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. So he's talking about God is going to pour out his blessings on his people, living among the Gentiles. Everybody benefits, right? Because if you're living around people that are getting God's blessings, a little of that's going to rub off on you, okay? So, but the bottom line is God's people continue to grow and to grow and to grow because of this. And this is what happened. Isn't this the promise that God made Abraham thousands of years ago? That this was going to continue. So anyway, they will be powerful. He starts describing them as the lion among the beasts of the forest. And they can go around doing whatever they want. God is going to bless them with power. No one's going to be able to stand against them. All of their enemies will be cut off. Now, I don't think we've seen all of God's people's enemies cut off, because we see them everywhere. But don't you sort of think that, based on what we know now, the history of God's people, and now we are the adopted children of God, that we are powerful, are we not? We are God's army, God's chosen people. That's us. I mean, I don't think that what the Jewish people at that time, the concept they had of how their kingdom was going to grow, ever included anything like what it is today, where when the Messiah came, he came to save us all, right? To the Jew first, but then to the Gentile. And we're included in that group. And it just continues to grow and flourish and get more and more. Now, it looks like we're on kind of the minority end today, because we don't see much godly stuff around us a whole lot, guess it depends on who you surround yourself with, but I think that we can look at this prophecy and see where this has come to pass. This is what's happening today. So he starts talking about all of their enemies going to be cut off. Then he goes on in the next few verses and he says, thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots. And I will cut off the cities of thy land, and throw down all thy strongholds. And I will cut off, let's stop there. No, I'll read these last two verses. And I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers. Thy graven images also will I cut off, and thy standing images out of the midst of thee, and thou shalt no more worship the work of thine hands. There's a lot of things that are going to change, okay? He starts talking now, and this is kind of strange. He's talking to his people here, and he's talking about, I'm going to take your horses and take your chariots. You're not going to need cities. You're not going to need these strongholds. Well, that sounds kind of funny. Why do you think why do you think that's part of this prophecy? What does he mean by taking away their horses and their chariots and their strongholds? They will come to rely more and more on God. They won't need these things. God is in control. God is leading it. They don't need horses. They don't need their chariots. They don't need their strongholds. If you have those things, you are leaning on your own self to protect yourself and to do this. And God is telling them, I will take care of this. Your enemies will cut off. You don't need your chariots. You don't need your horses. You don't need your strongholds. We are to rely on God for everything, are we not? And if we don't learn to become dependent on Him, not that we're not supposed to work for ourselves and go out and do our thing, but God will take care of His people. And He's telling them here, you're not going to need these things when this happens. But along with that, He's also going to take away those things that have so seriously impacted their relationship with Him. No more witchcraft, no more soothsayers, no more idolatry. That's all coming away. There's not going to, now obviously we know that that's something that's going to happen sometime in the future. That's not come to be yet. And that's what I'm talking about. This whole passage kind of jumps chronologically all over the place, and you have to really watch it. But God is going to take away those things that so easily distract us from following Him. That's not going to be an issue anymore. So all of this is to be in the future, right? Something to hope for, something to put hope in. And I'm sure that in hindsight, when you read this and you look at all these things that Micah says is going to happen, in hindsight, that hope is easier for us than it is for them, right? Because we've seen the Messiah come, or we know not that we were there, but we know the Messiah has come. We know that the Savior has come. We know that the King of Kings has come, and we know that He's going to reign forever. They were in very dark times. Their hope was probably more like candlelight, and for us it's like our sunlight, right? That's what we base our lives on. If we profess to follow Jesus Christ, I mean, that's our hope right there. That's what we place our hope in. For them, it's still a wish list. But we get to see time after time after time, because, we are much farther down the road than they were, all of the things that God has fulfilled, all the things that He said were going to take place. We've seen all of those things that have already been fulfilled. Now, we know that there's still some things coming that have not been fulfilled yet, like when He returns. We haven't seen that yet. But we've seen this over and over and over again. So it's a little easier, I think, for us. But that gives for us, think of the confidence that should put in each one of us. That if God said that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. If Jesus said that I've come to save you from sin and you will live in eternity with me, does anybody doubt that? We have total confidence that that's exactly what's going to happen, don't we? The fact that He has not returned, do you have any less confidence today that He will come back? Aren't you pretty sure that he's going, don't we live with that expectation all the time? That's our faith. Jesus is going to return. He's going to take his church. That's going to be all of this, and our eternity is going to be spent in heaven with him, period. We have that confidence. We know. We don't look at it as a wish list. We know that that's going to happen. We have an expectation that that's going to happen. That's what is the big difference between their hope and our hope. But that can only happen, you can only have that type of hope if you're in relationship with him. If you don't have any faith or confidence in him, then you're not going to have any faith or confidence that that's going to happen, right? You would have no hope. You would just be hopeless. Well, this is it. This world is it. This is all we have. As soon as I die, that's it, and everybody else goes on, and whatever happens, happens. I'm confident that this is not it. I have total faith. This is not it. I enjoy my life. I like my life. But this is not it. This is not all there is to life. Don't we all have perfect confidence that that's what's going to happen? I kind of got off my notes here a little bit. But the only way to have that is to be in relationship with him. You have to put your faith and your confidence in him and trust in him that these things are going to happen. You know what? We can expect that they'll happen. All right, I appreciate it. I'm out of time. Kids are lining up. Appreciate it, everybody.